Hello there, and welcome to the Hobbyist Hangout podcast, the podcast about all things hobbies. We're talking about planning, bullet journaling, our love for stationery, art, projects, and getting into all kinds of fun things that we build our hobbies around. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about a very exciting topic. We're going to be talking about fountain pens. This very intimidating area of stationery that for myself even I was very intimidated by until I started to dabble and learn a bit more. We're going to be talking about some of my favorite fountain pens, and I'll be sharing how I got into this little hobby of fountain pens and ink. I'll also be sharing some of my other fountain pens, dip pens, not like the calligraphy ones and nibs, but talking a little bit more about some different areas that you can play around with pens if you're interested. And we're also going to share a little bit about inks, because one of my favorite parts about fountain pens and dip pens are the different type of inks that are out there and what we can use to express ourselves in different ways. Before we get into the topic, I want to give a big old shout out to Sarah Choi. She was our very first monthly supporter here on the Hobbyist Hangout podcast, and you can do the same by heading over to anchor.fm/hobbyist hangout. There you can go ahead and support the podcast however you would like with a monthly donation. You can also check out where you can find this podcast on different platforms and also on all the different social media platforms as well. So let's go ahead and get into it and talk about fountain pens. So the way that I was introduced to fountain pens, honestly, was through bullet journaling. There's a lot of different creators that were using different pens and watching them write, and I always thought, that looks beautiful, but I could never do that because I'm left-handed and I would just smear that ink all over the place. I also was a little unsure about fountain pens themselves because a lot of my experience in seeing fountain pens, they were all really expensive. And I did not in my entire life ever think I would spend more than a few bucks on a pen. The thing is that over time you start to really appreciate fountain pens and supporting other creators and just really falling in love with this hobby. I don't know what you would call it, a craft, a collection, all of the different things. So my very first fountain pen was actually a gift from my sister-in-law, and it was the Lamy All-Star. And Lamy is a brand that's been around for a very long time. They have a lot of different versions of their pens that you can check out, but the All-Star was great for me because it was a great introduction in a very subtle way. The pen itself is not super expensive. You can find these for, under $20 sometimes with the sale. They do go up in price a little bit. Lamy itself has kind of a wide range of expensive and not super expensive pens. But what was cool about it is that I start to learn a little bit more about fountain pens themselves, how they work. I got the one that was like Pacific Blue. I think it was a limited edition version of this pen or color of it. They have so many different colors. It's quite beautiful. But they introduced me to things like cartridges, right? And I always thought you had to use just raw ink in fountain pens. I didn't even know about cartridges, but you can buy cartridges, pop them into your pen and use them like normal. Cartridges empties, you get rid of it or reuse the cartridge. We'll talk about that later on with the inks. And just pop another one in there and you're good to go. It also started to learn about the nib sizes. I think when I got this pen, it came with like maybe a medium nib or maybe a thicker nib. And similar to when you're writing with like an ink pen, you like different thicknesses or thinnesses of those pen tips. And so I found with the Lamy specifically, you can buy different nibs that work together. It's almost like customizing a pen a little bit. And then I started to learn more about ink converters. I was used to the cartridges and popping them into my pens, but an ink converter is used in a similar way, except you draw up the ink that you want to use. That is my favorite part because there are so many beautiful inks out there that you can try. And what's cool is like you have one pen that has all these different ways to express itself through the ink and your handwriting in different ways that you can use it. And it was so great. And I loved it. So when I got that pen, I used it hardcore. It was like in my very first bullet journal, I think it was, or maybe my second one when I got that pen. And I was like, I'm going to use this all the time. And what was great is at that point when I was using that Leuchtturm notebook, the ink worked very well on there. I never had like bleed through or anything like that. And I was really nervous about it. I think that's what a lot of people also are nervous about with fountain pens too. Like I'm using ink and this pen with this nib and it's flowing and am I going to ruin my notebook? I think it's rare that fountain pens like leak or bust open randomly, probably a lot more than they used to. I remember walking around work with my pen and my bullet journal and people were like, whoa, you're writing with a fountain pen. Like, aren't you terrified that's going to bust open in your pocket or, and like ruin your clothes? And I didn't actually think about that. I was like, yes, I am nervous. Like, do I want to carry this in my pocket? Will that happen? but I've had multiple fountain pens over the years and never have they ever burst open in my pocket. So if that is a fear of yours, rest assured there's new technologies now to keep you safe. So that fountain pen was great. I actually only used that one for a long time. I didn't ever buy anything else for years. And what was cool is that as I was using it, I was finding other people who were also interested in fountain pens too. Someone that I worked with at work, I found out that she was a big pen aficionado. She had a lot of different types. One of the things she introduced me to, which I didn't even know existed, were, I'll call them disposable fountain pens. So I think she had one that was from Pilot. Since then, I've found other ones from other brands. Zebra has like a 5-pack of different colors. But what's neat about it is that these can be used like a regular pen, but they have the fountain pen nib, so you get this different kind of feeling of how you're using that pen. And when you're done with it, you can dispose of it if you want to. All of the ink is, encapsulated inside of the barrel. You're not changing anything or doing anything with it, and it's super great. And there's a lot of different brands out there that do that as well. I was actually first introduced to, I'll call it like a reusable, disposable looking fountain pen through a brand called Preppy. I went to the DC Pen Show. I think that was last year. I want to say it was. Yes, last year. Right? Yes. And while I was there, I mean, there's a billion beautiful pens. Oh my gosh. If you ever have a pen show around you, go and just visit, walk around, enjoy. It's amazing. People are very cool. But I was introduced to Preppy, which was cool. They said it's like one of the world's most used fountain pens. It looks like a disposable fountain pen, like those Pilots or like the Zebra ones. But what's cool is that you actually can replace the cartridge that's there with different colors, or you can even refill these, like I was talking about before. All you do with the cartridge is just pop it into your pen, and it will go into the feed, right, and offer that ink to the tip of your pen. And then when all that ink is gone, again, you can dispose of that cartridge and pop in a new one. Or recently, I actually just bought like an ink syringe, which lets me like suck up ink and then inject it into another cartridge. And then you can keep using it as well. It's a great way to like reuse something that looks like it's a one-time use type of pen. Those have all been very great. I think they give you great opportunities to kind of introduce yourself to fountain pens without going all in and worrying too much about like ink converters and different inks and like how to clean out your pen and some of the maintenance that comes along with owning and having a fountain pen. Those are great introductions to it. And like I said, the Lamy was my first introduction. I think it's a wonderful starter pen if you're interested in purchasing a gift for someone that is interested in getting into it as well. Once I started to get into it a bit more, it really opened up my eyes to all of the different types of pens that were out there. My reintroduction to fountain pens, because I took a little bit of a break between when I was using that Lamy and then when I got back into it. And what really jump-started my new love for fountain pens was actually a really cool brand collaboration I got to do with Lavenger. So Lavenger is a stationery and lifestyle company out there. They were like, hey, we would love to work with you and the Men Who Bullet channel. How you're using fountain pens and pens inside of your bullet journal is very cool. Like, we'd love for you to try it out. And I got this great opportunity to try out one of their pens. I was unsure about it, to be totally honest. It's called True Writer. So if you ever head over to the Lavender website, that's what you're looking for. And it's similar to like how you can use the Lamy, right? You get a beautiful nib, you get the converter with it if you want to purchase it, you can get the ink cartridges and use it with it. The nibs are beautiful. The pen works similar to the other one. But what I really started to notice when I got back into it, and why I think so many people have a lot of different pens, is that all of them write a little bit different. The ink feeds deliver ink to the tip maybe faster or slower. The nib, how flexible it is or how inflexible it is, can really change the way you write and the way that you enjoy or maybe you don't enjoy writing with these pens. But what was cool about this is it kind of was like, okay, Mark, like you do enjoy writing with fountain pens. Like maybe we get back into it. And with most of my hobbies, I'm in and out of hobbies constantly over here. So right now I'm on a big fountain pen and fountain pen ink kick. So in my life right now, I have a lot of this going on and I love it. But I did want to share with you before we move into like the dip pen part of this, which is a different classification of fountain pens, in my opinion here. Some of my other favorite ones that I have. So I have one pen in my collection. I think I maybe only have like 10 fountain pens or so. It's not a whole lot, and most of them are pretty inexpensive. But the nicest one that I have is from Cochran Pens, and it's called the Endura, and it's the Deco Crest pen. If you're on the video podcast on YouTube or on Spotify, you can see this, but I call this my Harry Potter wand pen. It is a beautiful, like, I don't know how to describe it. Like the design of it is so awesome. And if you're on a regular podcast, like when you're in a safe spot, like look it up, right? Cochlear and Dura, you'll see how beautiful these pens are. Like they're just magical looking. And this pen is nice. It has a nice tip. The nib, I mean, on it is beautiful. And I'm like, Mark, like, you should really use this at some time soon. I haven't used it yet. I feel embarrassed to say that. It's just so beautiful. It's like I just want it to always look beautiful on my shelf. Like using it seems weird, but I got to break that and I got to do it at some point. But that's like the more expensive side of this. Some of those get a little bit pricey, but they're beautiful. So they are great gifts for yourself, especially if you love writing, or a fantastic, graduation, birthday, holiday gift for someone if you think that they would love and appreciate a pen. I'll tell you, of all the different ones that I have, I love, love, love this next one. So it's from Monteverde, USA. It's called the One Touch Engage. Here's why I love this pen. It has this technology. It's called ink ball technology. So what it is it's a click pen. So similar to any other click pen that you have that would just have ink inside of like that long pen cartridge. It looks just like that. It writes like a ballpoint pen, but it takes fountain pen ink. So it comes with a cartridge or the converter that you can use. You put it inside of the pen. You can use any ink that you want, and it will write with that ink, but write as a ballpoint pen. So it's great because it retracts, so you don't have the pen sticking out all the time. You don't have to cap it. There's no cap on it. It looks cool. It writes awesome, and it's not super expensive. It's under $100. Literally, I used this pen for 3 months straight, and every time I would run out of ink, I would just put a different one in there. I just loved writing with it. It was so much fun. So I always keep this in a rotation. I'm currently trying to rotate through more of my pens just over time versus just using one forever. The other one that I really love, and this always surprises people when they're like, can you recommend the best pen for me to start with in fountain pens without like being super expensive? And I've actually been, sending people over to this one. So Dryden is the name of the pen company, and they have beautiful fountain pens. They are super affordable. You get like a whole starter kit when you order them, and it's really amazing. I'll link this and the other pens that I'm talking about over on my Amazon shop if you're interested. Just go to amazon.com/shop/menwhobullet, and I have like inks and pens over there. But just so you can compare the different ones for yourself and see what you might like. What I love about this is I think it's under about $15 or under $20. The nib of this is very cool looking. It doesn't look like the other ones. It writes beautifully. It is super reliable, and you can use ink cartridges or a converter, and they come with so many, like a box of like over 20, I want to say. I feel like this is the best introduction to a fountain pen if you're unsure. It gives you everything that you need. You can use the cartridges. It's a fountain pen feed. You can write with it and see what you like. And for $15, it is such a deal. It is such a steal. It's absolutely amazing. So I love introducing people to those because I'm like, this is great. It's a great way to kind of dip your toe without going too far. And like I mentioned before, if you're really like, I'm not quite sure, go for those disposable or like the preppy one that you can refill and use it before you go in too deep. So the next category that I want to talk to you about, I think it's still part of the fountain pen family, but these are pens that are not used in the same way, meaning that they are kind of in the moment type uses. They don't come with a cartridge. They don't come with a converter. These are not like something you're necessarily like taking to work with you and using throughout the day, because you would also need to have ink with you constantly. We're going to be talking about dip pens next, because this is another category that I'm just starting to get into now a little bit more. And I have my friend Eric over at Emerald Stationery, his shop, for introducing me to like these newer ones that I fell in love with. So dip pens are kind of your typical, you have a nib and you have a holder. It's like the calligraphy pens that you see in the art stores, right? You dip it inside of your ink and then you write with it. And it'll hold on to ink for different varieties of time. Most of those dip pens are like maybe like a handful of letters. One of them that I have comes with different tips, and I'll just tell you, it's the Kakamori nibs. Like, I love these things so much. They look very cool. They write for much longer. But my introduction to them really honestly was through those calligraphy pens. I was really focused on trying to make my handwriting look better. I thought, oh, Mark, you can be a lefty calligrapher. But I'm just learning that, like, I have a style, but it's not beautiful. I'm not making wedding invitations. Let's put it that way. But I like the way it works. I love the look of a thick and a thin as you're writing with it, and thinking and being intentional as you write. I love that. I think that's super fun. But I also really like cool, like, interesting looking pens. So one of the things that I got years ago was actually called a fluid writer. I believe these are actually used for like very nice detail. I think people use these on like cars, but someone online had it and I was like, what is that? And so what a fluid writer is, it's like a very fine point looking pen, and it has like a little tiny area up top, like a barrel almost, that you drop like little tiny drops of ink into, and you can just start writing with it. It doesn't like pour out. I don't know. It's some kind of magic in science, but you can write with it. It's a really nice mono line. It's not like a thick or a thin. It's a little bit more detailed probably than like most people want to get into, because like I said, you need like a small little like syringe or something to get the ink into the little barrel here. But that was my next introduction, aside from just like a calligraphy nib. I was like, oh, this is cool. I love the look of monoline. This reminded me of writing with a pen. And what's amazing about it is that when you put ink in this thing, it lasts for a long time. You can really write for a long time. It always blows my mind how much you can do with it. You can also put watercolor in this too if you want to. You can do a lot of different things with it. So it's called a fluid liner. Again, I'll have this linked on my shop, or you can look it up for yourself if you want to. So that was like next. That was like, okay, cool. I don't have a converter. I don't have a cartridge. I have to put a drop of ink in this and it'll write for a good amount of time. It was super neat. Then I started seeing people using glass pens. And I was like, what in the world is this? Like, how does this work? What magic is this? So if you are on Instagram and you're part of any of the lettering community or ink fountain pen, you will see people using these. And what's cool about the glass dip pens is that they are like super low maintenance. They're glass, and all you do really is just dip it into a bottle of ink and you can start writing with it. So the design of these is neat because it has a tip on it. So it's all made out of glass or a different material. And then there's like these channels, or these rungs, I call them, that are inside the tip. And what that means, and what it does, is when you dip your pen into the ink kind of pulls inside of these vertical columns. And then as you write, it's feeding the tip of your pen with that ink as you're going. And there's a lot of different sizes. There's different shapes, colors, materials, all of that. And this is actually something my daughter picked out at the pen show that we went to. She saw it, was like, I need to have it. That looks so cool. And she actually really enjoys writing with it as well when she comes down to the studio to try things out. And this was neat. This was like, okay, glass dip pen. I like this. This is really cool. The only problem is it didn't last super long. It lasts pretty long, just not like super long. And so I was like, all right. So I use it every now and again. Again, I have my other ink pens and my favorite pens and my ink ball pens, all this other stuff that I'm using. So if I'm sitting down to do something nice, or I want to feel fancy, I'll bring out that dip pen, the glass dip pen, and use it because I'm like, oh, this looks neat. Not that long ago, my buddy Eric he has a shop called Amarillo Stationery. He had a super cool looking dip pen that I am obsessed with. So the brand is called Kakamori, Kakimori. And these are amazing because unlike the glass dip pen, it's still a dip pen, but the part of it that goes in the ink is just the nib. And it's like a cylinder, kind of almost looks like a bullet in a way. And this has these engineered channels into it. So similar to the glass dip pen that has them a little bit more, I say naturally, I'm sure it's like pressed into something. These are like engineered, cut into the tip here. And this thing holds on to so much ink. You can write like an entire page with these nibs. And what's cool is you get like a holder. They have aluminum. I have a wooden one. They just pop on the top. You can start using them, writing with it. Whatever inks you want, just keep going. It's beautiful. The first one I got was in stainless steel. And then I saw there was a brass one available. And I was like, I have to have it. They write very similarly, but very cool. And then I also just found out that they also have kind of more of that standard fountain pen nibs that you can get. It all works with the same pen holder that you get. You can hold on to it. And I feel like it's really like opened me up to like using these at different times. Like the glass dip pen, for instance, was like a very like special time to sit down, open a bottle of ink and write with it. Cause it was kind of like that very old school kind of like dip your feather in the ink and write the letter to grandmama and send it, to the next country or state. She'll get it in 16 weeks, by the time the mail gets there. I don't know why I feel like that whenever I write with a dip pen, but I do. It feels like very kind of old school and I love it. But using these different nibs and pens and stuff like that has really opened me up to just saying, you know what? It doesn't have to always be a fountain pen that you write with. It could actually be a dip pen that you're writing with. Again, you have to have an ink bottle to use it, but it's still very cool. So there's a lot of these different ways that you can go about getting into it. I really like these Kakamori brand ones. I think they look nice. They're beautifully designed and they do last for a pretty long time when you're writing with them at home. So, we have all these different types of pens. As you can tell, I'm very excited about them. I love using them. I love collecting them. I love sharing them with other people. When someone's like, hey, I'm looking for something to write with that's special or a gift to give somebody that's special. Before I used to be like, oh, buy them a notebook, bullet journaling, go bullet journaling. I still love it. I still think it's great. A notebook is a nice gift, but like a nice pen, that feels awesome. And not like a cheesy nice pen, but like a very cool, intricate looking pen that you can buy is pretty neat. So these Kakabori ones I'm all about. I'm just collecting the nibs now. I have them all. Oh, you know what I don't have? They actually have a glass tip pen that works inside of the holder. That's the last one that I need to get for this whole collection. I'll be very happy when I get that. They're sold out currently. But that's kind of all the pens and stuff. So I thought what we could do now is go ahead and kind of convert over to the ink part of this conversation, right? So far, we've talked about fountain pens and we've talked about a few different pens that you can use. You can use cartridges, you can use converters, you can refill cartridges if you want, if you don't want to go into a converter. Now we need to talk about the ink because ink to me is the personality of writing. I truly believe that because the way in which the ink makes it to the page, the pen is nice. They have their own designs, they have their own personalities, how they write, the nibs, all of that. But the ink is where it's at, in my opinion. Ink to me is actually more intimidating than the fountain pen itself. Because you know what? It's not the fountain pen that intimidates me. It's getting the ink into the pen that scares the crap out of me. And even as someone who's been doing this now for a good amount of time with different pens, every single time I open an ink bottle, my biggest fear is spilling it all over the place. I don't know. Every time I look at an ink bottle unopened, I close it immediately because I'm like, no, like I will knock it over. There will be ink everywhere. I'll ruin my clothes. I will ruin the floor. I'll ruin my desk. It makes me very nervous, but I love the way that they look. So, when I first started getting into the inks and the pens, I was very safe. So for instance, when I had the Lamy All-Star and I wanted to try the converter, I just bought the ink bottle from Lamy that had, the same kind of ink inside of it and you draw it up and use it. I like that one. It's very nice. When I went and I started working with the Lavender pen, Lavender has a very cool looking ink bottle as well. I got it. I was like, okay, cool. Then when I started to play around with the Monteverde USA pens, when I started to play with the Cocklands and ones like that, and I was working with the brand, they sent me a bunch of goodies. And this is like where it really kickstarted my ink obsession because not only did they just send me like some cool ones, right? Just like the basic blue or black, but then they introduced me to things like they have an emotions collection, right? So like red love is on here and there's peace blue and like just, slowly dipping my toe into those inks and trying them out. And then I started to spread my wings a little bit. I came across a brand on Instagram. Instagram truly is doing its job with introducing me to things. And I found this amazing band called Birmingham Pen Company. And Birmingham Pen Company is actually a small little shop in, I believe it's Pennsylvania, and they make their own inks, like small little, batches, and their inks are beautiful. So one of my favorite ones is actually called Midnight Twinkle. And you hear that and you're like, Mark, come on, man, twinkly ink. I don't know. Well, when I tell you when you write with this pen, you feel like a wizard. You feel like you are the coolest damn person in the room because your ink looks awesome coming out of your pen. And then you get like this slight little shimmer inside of there too, which just makes the ink light up on the page. And I just smile every time I use it because it looks so beautiful. And I was nervous about buying inks because I thought, well, you know what? If I buy the one ink, like I'm going to blow through this ink in no time. I'm going to be buying inks all the time. I could not be more wrong. I don't think I can use all of the ink that I currently have in my lifetime. I don't know that I'll ever empty a bottle of these because, well, one, I have so many of them and I can't make a decision. It's like a whole other hobby of collecting ink bottles now. But it's just it goes such a long way. When you're just using a regular ink pen or a gel pen, I don't think we really think about how long we use those pens. Ink lasts a really long time. And when you're putting, a few milliliters inside of a pen, you don't realize it until it's gone, like how long those things last you. So I'll tell you, like, I've really been enjoying some of my favorites. Birmingham Pen Company is one that I like because they're somewhat local. Like, I'm in Maryland and they're kind of, just the next state over. But I think that their designs are amazing. Their colors are so cool. Some of my favorite from them, they have one called Electric Patina, which is beautiful. They also have some really weird ones like Muskrat or Coal. You get all these different varieties of colors with them. And I really loved them, and I love writing with their inks a lot. They're a very cool company as well. When I went to that pen show back last year, I got introduced to a whole new world of people, a whole new world of pens. One of them was called Pelikan, Pelikan. And Pelikan has been a brand I did not know has existed for quite some time. They have really cool pens. I actually got my daughter a pen from them because they have really cool, like more kid-friendly pens. Very nice stuff. Their inks were super neat. But you know me, if you don't, I love weird stuff. I don't want the normal. And at their table, they had highlighter ink. Like the same yellow highlighter stuff you see inside of your highlighters at the stationery store, the office store, you can buy it in an ink bottle. And I thought, this is the coolest damn thing I've ever seen. I need to buy this ink and a pen just so I can highlight my pages with highlighter ink. Have I done it? No, I have not. Do I want to? Absolutely. I'll get to it eventually. But it's just cool to have, and I think it was neat. And I was like, I gotta have it. And since then, I actually bought another green color from them. I really like their inks. They work well inside of my journals and notebooks and stuff like that, and it's cool. And then for like the last bit is a company that I've been admiring from afar for a long time. And that company is Ferris Wheel Press Inks. So Ferris Wheel Press, I actually remember seeing their stuff a few years ago because they had notebooks and just some other really beautiful tools, and their packaging on their inks is so friggin' cool. I was just like, oh my gosh, I at some point will need to try this. And I just wasn't, I don't know, I never bit the bullet right away. And then a friend of mine was on their affiliate team and was like, Mark, I know you've talked about wanting to try their notebooks. I know that you're getting into more fountain pens and dip pens. Like, you should really look into them and being a part of like their program. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm a bullet journaler. Like, they're not going to let me do that. But I still applied last year and took a few months, but I just got accepted into their affiliate program not that long ago. And it's actually a really exciting time for me because I am starting to play with inks so much more. So Ferris Wheel Press itself, the company is out of Canada. They have the most amazing inks I've ever seen. When I talked about liking some of the ones from Birmingham Pen, like, again, the Midnight Twinkle, there's a few other ones. Ferris Wheel Press has a whole collection of different inks that they use. And what's cool is that they go into like these collection modes. So like my favorite, one of the ones that I have in my hand right now, again, if you're not on the video podcast, it's called Grand Central Skies. So it's like a teal ink, and then it has like some shimmer to it as well. And when you write with it, it's that same feeling you get when I was talking about the Midnight Twinkle. Like, you feel like the coolest person in the room, writing with this beautiful ink, like getting these cool effects from the inks. And they had other ones too. It was like a 3 ink series. They had Grand Central Skies. There was a green one that I really liked. I gotta look at Central Park Greens. That's the name of it. Their packaging is also absolutely stunning. And they also had a Lights on Broadway, which was like a magenta color as well. And they were just beautiful. I was like, this is really neat. And so some of the first inks that I got when I became a part of this program were those. Then, they have this fairy tale collection that they're doing. So it's ink that's influenced by different fairy tales. So like, I didn't get the first one from them, but I did get one that was a part of this, and it's called Cloak and Forest. So it's after like Little Red Riding Hood, like in that kind of zone. Green ink with like, I want to say like a red kind of sparkle to it or undertone. It's just beautiful. If you check out my Instagram page, I do a lot where I'm like swatching these colors so you can see them and doing it. So, using those inks are really nice. And there's kind of like, there's a novelty to it, I would say. I think that's the word I'm looking for, but like not in like a cheesy way. Like there's a novelty to using a green ink with sparkle in it that's red, right? Or using like some of these other ones, right, that have these cool effects to it. And you get very excited about it. And you're like, I'm going to use this everywhere and all the time. And it can be a little bit difficult. But, there's also kind of your more standard ones. And something I talked about very early on, the reasons that I thought I was never going to be able to use a fountain pen was because I'd smear it because I'm a lefty and that's what lefties do. I started to actually look into different types of inks that would be more lefty friendly. So when I started to look into that, I saw that they had, Private Reserve Ink is a company that's out there. They have an ultra black but fast drying ink, for instance. So, when I'm using a lot of these fountain pens for work or in my journal, especially when I'm at work and I'm writing down notes and I have to close my notebook and go, I don't have the time to wait for a fountain pen ink to dry. I'm not walking around with blotter paper to make sure that I can close a notebook. So something like fast drying inks or different formulas that are out there for different brands, you might want to look into, especially if you're trying to build that pen ink into your day to day. It's not just something you sit down at your desk and like write something nice to somebody, but you use it for your productivity in your notebooks, whatever that might be. You might also want to check those out too. Like I said, this one was called Private Reserve Ink, Ultra Black Fast Drying. I know that the Birmingham Pen Company has a formula that dries fast. You just have to search that up and look for it, because otherwise, if you don't, you might smear it. It might not dry, get on the other pages, and you have to just kind of be careful. It's enjoyable. As a hobby, I really love this. And I say like, well, you're like, Mark, well, you write in a bullet journal every single day. Like, how is this a hobby? It's absolutely a hobby. Like getting these pens and these inks and collecting them and using them every now and again, to me, kind of defines that hobby. It's something special. It's not normal of just like, a regular old pen and writing stuff down. It feels exciting. I think that's a big part, we've talked about in the past, like what is a hobby, like one of the first episodes, really just understanding and saying, we're collecting things, we're enjoying this. This isn't something everyone else is doing, but does have a community built around it. And we have a lot of fun with it. And that's exactly what fountain pens are to me. They're fun. Yes, they're a writing utensil. They're a tool to get other things done. But when you can really express your personality through the type of pen, the material, the nib, the color of your ink, that's when things get very exciting. And I think that's what consistently, piques my interest, is there's always a new ink to try. There's a new brand doing something cool. There's a cool new pen design out there that I want to get. And that keeps my little hobby engine going when it comes to fountain pen ink and dip pens and the pens themselves and fountain pens. As I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, if you're interested in supporting it, you can head over to anchor.fm/hobbyist hangout, and there's a button there to support this podcast. You can give a monthly donation if you'd like. Whatever you'd like. It's up to you. You can pick, actually. I really appreciate it. This is just a fun podcast for me to do, and I love talking about stationery and fun stuff like that with you. The next episode that I want to do is actually talking about something new that I got into, which is ink blending. This happens a lot in like the card making community, but recently I've really fallen in love with it. It's the distressed oxides and stuff like that. I've been using them a little bit more in my bullet journal, so I thought maybe we could talk about that next time. That's a fun topic and like another hobby that I'm getting into. I started with one, and now I have like over 10 of these inks and trying to incorporate them in different ways. So we'll talk about that next time. And then I do want to get back into some bullet journal content. I know a lot of you like when we talk about that. I might do like a mid-year reflection inside of my bullet journal. This year I'm using a bullet journal and I'm also using a dated planner. So a lot of cool stuff is happening there. So we've got some fun topics coming up, and I'd also love to hear from you and different things you'd love to hear about on this podcast too. So as always, thank you so much, and I will talk with you next time. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Happy planning, happy collecting, happy hobbying. See ya.